There are encounters that change everything, moments when two completely different worlds collide, when innocence confronts cruelty, when a child dares to challenge an empire built on pride. That day, on the vast lands of one of America's wealthiest men, a billionaire laughed with cruel delight when an 8-year-old boy said he could heal him. The man, who had spent fortunes on the best doctors money could buy, mocked the child with every ounce of contempt he had left. But the boy's calm answer would soon change everything. Alexander Whitmore had everything money could offer, except the ability to walk. At 52, he ruled a multi-billion-dollar empire from his wheelchair, his power only feeding the bitterness that consumed him. His Connecticut mansion, spanning hundreds of acres, was less a home and more a monument to control. Every inch of it mirrored the cold perfection he demanded from others and from life itself. That September morning, Alexander was firing yet another employee. The gardener had committed the unforgivable sin of stepping on freshly cut grass with dirty shoes. "You're pathetic," Alexander said, his tone razor sharp. 20 years here and you still haven't learned that perfection isn't optional." The old man begged for mercy. His wife was sick, his bills mounting, but Alexander's smile was merciless. "You should have thought of that before staining my lawn." Moments later, his personal assistant, Margaret, entered the office. "Sir, Dr. Harrison from London called. The experimental results are in." Alexander grabbed the phone with forced hope, only to end the call moments later in pure frustration. Another failure, another fortune wasted. The top neurologists in the world all agreed. His spinal injury was irreversible. "Incompetence," he muttered, slamming the receiver down. "Decades of research, endless decrees, and not one of them can fix what I pay them to fix." Then his head of security, James, entered hesitantly. "Sir, there's a boy at the gate. Been waiting for hours. Says he needs to see you." "A boy?" Alexander scoffed. "What could a child possibly want from me?" "I tried to send him away," James said carefully, "but he insists he can heal you." For the first time in years, Alexander fell silent. Then a grin, cold, intrigued, spread across his face. "Bring him in. If nothing else, I could use the entertainment." 15 minutes later, the office door opened. James walked in with a small boy, dark-skinned, poorly dressed but standing tall. His eyes shone with an impossible calm for someone so young. He didn't flinch at the luxury surrounding him or the man glaring from behind a mahogany desk. "So you're the boy who thinks he can fix me," Alexander sneered. "And do you have any idea how many doctors, real doctors, have failed at that?" The child met his gaze. "I can make your legs work again," he said simply. Alexander's laughter shook the room. "You? Heal me?" He leaned forward, slamming a hand on the desk. "Kid, I've spent $40 million on specialists from Switzerland, Japan, and New York. And you, what are you, 8? Think you can do what they couldn't?" The boy didn't blink. "They study what they know," he said softly. "I work with what they've forgotten." The words sliced through Alexander's arrogance like a whisper through glass. For a moment he didn't know whether to laugh again or get angry. "Fine," he said finally, smirking. "If you can make me walk, I'll give you $1 million. But when you fail, you'll leave knowing your dreams have limits and people like me set them." The boy nodded. "Then you'd better have that check ready." Something in Alexander's chest stirred, something he hadn't felt in years. Doubt. He ordered James to cancel his meetings. "Let's see what miracle this little prophet thinks he's bringing." Alexander rolled his wheelchair closer, his tone icy. "Before you embarrass yourself, let me show you the truth." He pressed a button. Massive screens descended from the walls. X-rays, MRAs, medical charts filled the room, the work of some of the brightest minds in science. "This," he said proudly, "is the work of Dr. Harrison of London, Dr. Shen of Singapore, Dr. Weber of Berlin, people who have dedicated their lives to healing others. And every single one of them agrees. My spinal cord is permanently severed." The boy, whose name was David, remained quiet, studying the glowing screens. When Alexander paused for dramatic effect, David finally spoke. "I'd look at what's broken," he said, "but I see what's only forgotten how to work." Alexander felt his jaw tighten. "How dare you mock science with riddles?" he snapped. "Medicine is proof and logic, not poetry." But David's calm never faltered. He walked to the window, looking out over the flawless gardens. "How long have you been in that chair?" he asked. 5 years, Alexander barked. "And in 5 years, how many times have you tried to stand?" Alexander blinked, almost offended. "Stand? That's ridiculous. My spinal cord is destroyed." "Then you stopped trying before you started," the boy said quietly. Rage flared in Alexander's eyes. "I've spent millions trying to get better. Dozens of surgeries, therapies, treatments, and you say I've given up?" David didn't argue. He just met his gaze and said, "You trusted every doctor who told you it was impossible, and you believed them more than you believed yourself." For the first time in years, Alexander had no answer. The boy's words lingered in the air long after he left. That night, alone in the darkness, Alexander stared at his lifeless legs and whispered to himself, "What if the boy is right? What if the best minds are wrong?" 3 days passed, yet Alexander couldn't get the boy's words out of his head. What if the best minds are wrong? It echoed in his mind like a quiet thunder that refused to fade. He tried drowning it in reports, meetings, and whiskey, but the question kept finding him in the silence between thoughts. By the 4th morning, he snapped. "James," he called, voice trembling more than he wanted to admit. "Bring that boy back now." An hour later, David stood once again in his grand office. The same calm, steady gaze, the same simple clothes. But this time Alexander wasn't sneering. He was searching. "Sit down," the billionaire said, gesturing toward a chair across from him. "You've infected my mind with your nonsense," he muttered. "I haven't slept since you left. So, today you're going to explain exactly what you think you can do, without your riddles." David smiled faintly. "I can't explain what you're not ready to believe." Alexander leaned forward, irritation rising. "I built an empire by facing facts, logic, proof, not fairy tales." The boy tilted his head. "And yet logic hasn't helped you walk." The words hit like a bullet. Alexander opened his mouth to reply, but found nothing there. He looked away, his hands tightening on the arms of his wheelchair. David stood and walked closer, stopping right in front of him. "The doctors called this broken," he said, "but your legs aren't gone. They just forgot how to remember." Alexander almost laughed. "Remember? You're talking about muscles, not memories." "Everything in the body remembers," David said quietly. "Every cell listens to what the mind believes." Alexander felt his throat tighten. For the first time in years, he wasn't angry, he was afraid. "Do you want to try?" David asked. "Try what?" To remind them. The room felt smaller, air thicker. Alexander hesitated, then whispered, "What do you want me to do?" "Close your eyes," the boy said. "Don't think about the pain or the accident or what they told you. Think about standing. Think about what it felt like when the earth pushed back beneath your feet." Alexander obeyed reluctantly. He tried to picture it, his office floor, the weight of his body, the warmth of movement he hadn't known in years. Then David's voice came again, low and calm. "Now, tell your legs you still need them." Alexander almost scoffed, but he didn't. Instead, for reasons he couldn't explain, he whispered, "I need you." Silence. He said it again. "I need you." And something deep within him trembled. Not his chair, not the floor, but him. David placed a small hand on his knee. "Do you feel that?" "No," Alexander began, but then stopped. There was something. Not pain, not sensation. A spark, like an echo in the dark. He opened his eyes, heart pounding. I felt something." David smiled. "Good. Now stand." Alexander froze. "Stand? That's impossible." "Then do it anyway," said the boy. He gripped the arms of his chair, muscles long forgotten twitching in protest. For 5 years his body had obeyed gravity like a curse, but now, with every ounce of strength, he pushed, and his legs, his useless, lifeless legs, trembled. A sound escaped him, half gasp, half sob. He pushed harder. The tremors grew. Then impossibly, he rose, just a few inches, but enough to break the spell of 5 years of despair. He fell back into the chair, shaking, laughing and crying all at once. David stood quietly before him, the same peaceful smile on his face. "You see," the boy said softly, "your body never forgot it. It was your heart that did." Alexander looked at his legs in disbelief. 5 years. "And you?" "I didn't do anything," David interrupted gently. "You remembered yourself. The man who once ruled everything from a throne of bitterness sat there now, trembling, tears running freely down his face. For the first time in decades, he felt small and grateful. He looked at David, voice breaking. "Why me? Why help a man like me?" The boy's answer was simple. "Because you were the one who stopped believing first. And people like that are the ones who need hope the most." Alexander sat there, silent, unable to speak. The boy's words hit deeper than any truth he'd heard in his entire life. He had spent half a decade surrounded by the best doctors, scientists, and machines, and yet a child with no diploma, no wealth, had reached the part of him they never could. He leaned back in his chair, still trembling. His reflection in the glass wall looked like a stranger. The man who used to bark orders, humiliate people, and measure worth in dollars, now stared back with eyes full of something he didn't recognize. Humility. David broke the silence. "You still have work to do," he said gently. "Your body remembered once. It can remember again." Alexander nodded slowly, tears rolling down his face. "Teach me," he whispered. The boy smiled faintly. "I can't teach you. You already know how. You just forgot to believe it." Over the next few days, Alexander cleared his entire schedule. No meetings, no phone calls, no reports. Only quiet and the boy. Every morning, David arrived and guided him through what he called the remembering. It wasn't therapy. It wasn't medical. It was something deeper, a conversation between will and faith. They would sit in silence for hours. "Feel the ground," David would say. "Don't think about walking, think about being." And slowly, impossibly, the connection between Alexander's mind and his legs began to return. At first, just flickers, a twitch here, a tremor there, but each one was a revelation. One morning, after weeks of practice, David looked at him and said, "Today is the day." Alexander felt his heart pound. Day for what? For you to stand, not with your body, but with everything inside you. The air in the room felt alive. Alexander took a deep breath, gripping the chair once more. He closed his eyes, feeling the warmth of sunlight through the windows. He could almost hear his own heart sinking with the rhythm of the world. He pressed down, once, twice, and then suddenly the wheelchair rolled back as his weight shifted forward. His legs shook violently beneath him, but they held. For the first time in 5 years, Alexander Whitmore stood, not perfectly, not gracefully, but he stood. His laughter broke the silence. Raw, uncontrolled, the sound of disbelief. He stood there crying, shaking, laughing all at once, and the boy simply watched with calm pride. "You see," said David softly, "the impossible isn't broken. It's just forgotten." Alexander looked at the boy through tears. "I owe you my life. Whatever you want, money, a home, anything." David shook his head. "I don't want your money. Then what do you want?" Alexander asked. The boy's eyes glimmered with that same unexplainable peace. "Just promise me one thing. Never stop helping people who forgot how to hope." And before Alexander could respond, the boy smiled and walked toward the door. "Wait," Alexander called. "How can I find you again?" David turned, light catching his face. "You don't need to," he said. "Just keep remembering." Then he was gone. Days turned into weeks, and the miracle spread quietly through the mansion. The man who once barked orders from a chair now greeted every worker by name. He rehired the gardener he'd once humiliated and paid for his wife's treatment. He donated millions to hospitals and built a rehabilitation center under one condition, that no patient would ever be told their case was hopeless. When reporters asked about the boy, Alexander would only smile. "Some miracles don't need proof," he'd say. "They just need witnesses." Months later, Alexander stood on a small hill overlooking his estate. The wind brushed his face, his legs steady beneath him. He whispered to the air, "Thank you, David." And though no one answered, he could swear he heard a faint voice carried by the wind. "Keep walking." Years passed, and the legend of Alexander Whitmore spread far beyond Connecticut. The man once known for his cruelty had become a symbol of grace. News outlets called it the miracle of the Iron Mansion. But Alexander never claimed it was divine. It wasn't a miracle, he told them. It was a reminder. He sold half his companies and used the fortune to build something entirely new, the Whitmore Foundation for Hope. Its mission was simple: to give second chances to those the world had written off, the paralyzed, the poor, the forgotten. Every hallway of the foundation bore his favorite quote, "The body remembers what the heart believes." He funded research that combined medicine with compassion, science with soul. He insisted that every doctor on his payroll spend 1 hour a week not in a lab but in conversation, with patients, with families, with life. For the first time in decades, Alexander didn't feel like a king trapped in a golden cage. He felt like a man finally serving a purpose. Yet sometimes, in the quiet hours of night, he'd find himself looking toward the horizon beyond the gardens, wondering if the boy still walked somewhere under the same sky. He never stopped expecting him to return. 10 years went by. Alexander was now in his 60s. His hair had turned silver, his posture slower, but the fire in his eyes had never dimmed. One autumn morning, his secretary, Margaret, still loyal as ever, entered his study. "Mr. Whitmore, there's someone here to see you. No appointment, but he insists you'll remember him." Alexander looked up, confused. "Name?" She hesitated, tears forming in her eyes. "He says his name is David." The pen slipped from Alexander's hand. For a moment, he forgot how to breathe. "Send him in," he whispered. The door opened, and there he was. Not a boy this time, but a man, mid-20s, tall, calm, carrying the same unshakable light in his eyes. The years hadn't stolen his youth, had only refined it. Alexander stood slowly, no chair, no cane. "David," he breathed, as if saying the name could undo a decade of distance. The young man smiled, just as he had that first day. "You still stand beautifully," he said. Alexander laughed through tears. "You still arrive without knocking." They embraced. It wasn't a meeting between a billionaire and a healer, but between two souls bound by something greater than time. After a long silence, David spoke first. "I've been watching," he said softly. "The foundation, the hospitals, the people you've helped." "You remembered the promise." "I tried," Alexander replied, voice breaking. "I never forgot what you told me, that the impossible isn't broken. It's just forgotten." David nodded, looking around the study. Photographs covered the walls. Children in wheelchairs, families smiling, doctors holding hands with patients. A legacy of hope. "You did more than remember," David said. "You taught others to believe." Alexander looked at him closely. "You haven't aged a day," David smiled. "Time doesn't pass where faith lives." Tears welled in Alexander's eyes again. Are you even real?" David's smile didn't fade. "What is real? The chair you broke free from, or the faith that lifted you?" For a long moment, neither spoke. The wind stirred the curtains, and the sunlight washed the room in gold. Finally, David said, "I came back because it's almost your time." Alexander swallowed hard. "My time?" "Don't be afraid," David said gently. "You've done what you came here to do. The seed you planted will never die." Alexander's lips trembled. "Will I see you again?" "You never stopped seeing me," David whispered. "I was in every person you helped, in every life you touched, in every step you took." Then he smiled one last time. "Goodbye, Alexander. Keep walking." And before Alexander could blink, the space where the young man stood was empty, as if light itself had folded around him and left nothing behind. The next morning, Margaret found Alexander sitting peacefully in his chair, a faint smile frozen on his face, his hands resting on a letter addressed to the Whitmore Foundation board. Inside, in his own handwriting, were the final words he ever wrote. "Do not build monuments in my name. Build hope. Teach them that miracles are not rare. They're simply what happens when love remembers what logic forgets. He was buried under the oak tree on the foundation's main campus, where children now played every day. And years later, when visitors came to see the statue erected in his honor, they would notice something curious. Beside the bronze figure of Alexander standing tall, there was a smaller statue of a boy with his hand on the man's shoulder. No one ever knew who had commissioned it. It had appeared overnight with a simple plaque beneath: "Faith teaches the body to remember." The world had changed. Medicine had evolved. Science had advanced. But somewhere in every hospital, in every ward where hope felt small, there was a quiet story told in whispers. The story of the billionaire who stood again. The Whitmore Foundation for Hope had become a global movement. Centers had opened in Mexico City, São Paulo, Nairobi, Manila, and Lisbon. Every wall carried the same inscription, etched in gold letters: "Faith teaches the body to remember." Doctors now trained not only to study illness, but to see the person behind it. Therapists learn to listen before prescribing. And in classrooms around the world, children read Alexander's book, When the Body Remembers, a story no longer about wealth or paralysis, but about what it means to be human. In the Foundation's main hall in Connecticut, the statue of Alexander and the boy had become a pilgrimage site. People touched the bronze hand of the child and made silent wishes for healing, for strength, for courage to try again. No one knew who the boy truly was. Some called him a healer, others an angel, a miracle. But those who studied Alexander's journals found a final note, handwritten, almost faded. "He wasn't sent to heal my legs. He was sent to wake my soul." On the 25th anniversary of the Foundation, a massive ceremony filled the campus. Children who once couldn't walk now ran across the stage. Families cried, doctors smiled, and the audience rose in thunderous applause. In the front row sat an elderly woman with gray hair tied neatly back. It was Margaret, now retired, holding a worn-out book, Alexander's original manuscript, its pages yellowed by time and touch. She whispered, "You did it, sir. You really did." As the sun began to set, a quiet breeze swept through the gardens, rustling the leaves of the old oak tree where Alexander rested. The air shimmered softly, golden in the dying light, and for a brief, impossible instant, a young boy seemed to be standing beside the statue again, smiling. No one else saw him, except one little girl sitting by the fountain, her leg in a brace, watching the shimmer with wide eyes. The boy turned to her and said, almost in a whisper, "Do you want to walk?" She nodded silently. He smiled, touched her shoulder, and said, "Then remember how." And just like that, he was gone, leaving behind only a feather drifting in the air, and the sound of small footsteps taking their very first steps. The crowd gasped. The girl stood, trembling, crying, walking toward the sunlight. Margaret's hand covered her mouth as tears filled her eyes. She looked at the sky and whispered, "Thank you, David." Above them, the sun broke through the clouds, a burst of light falling over the oak, the statue, and the child walking again. And for everyone who witnessed it, one truth became clear: miracles never die. They simply move from one heart to another. If this story touched you, leave a comment below saying, "I still believe in the impossible." And remember, sometimes all it takes to change a life is one person brave enough to believe again.